Hi, I'm Mario Ariave with Utmost Performance. What I wanted to bring to you guys in today's video is we're in that time of the year where it's going to start getting dark earlier and where many of us are going to start experiencing cooler, cold temperatures. So, for a lot of us that are just normal 9 to 5 work folks that do the cycling thing on the side, although we take it seriously, we're going to find ourselves maybe not being able to ride outdoors as much as we normally would. And so, obviously, if we want to continue to build fitness, if we want to get ready for the next race season, we've got to continue training. And thankfully, we do have an option instead of going outside to train indoors. However, for many folks, this is a time of the year where they don't necessarily look forward to getting indoors and doing that kind of work. I'll admit, there really is something about just getting on a bike and pedaling and being able to go somewhere and cover some ground and being able to feel the wind on your face and all those great things. And we just don't get that inside. Even if we're riding inside on Zwift or some kind of other virtual platform they've come a long way and they've really made training indoors more enjoyable, there's still nothing like riding outdoors. But let's get into some nuts and bolts because for many of us, it's just a reality. Listen, we're going to have to be indoors. You're going to have to do the work indoors if you want to continue to build your fitness. So therefore, let me give you a couple of things that you can kind of think about as you're getting this plan together and figuring out how you're going to get through some of these cold, darker months to get you ready for the next season. The first thing that I want to address is, and this is something that I get frequently, a lot of individuals often tell me, they comment on their ride after they're done. I had to do this one indoors today. It just feels a lot harder indoors versus outdoors. And, is there a difference between riding indoors versus riding outdoors? Now, from a pure physiological level, in other words, from a heart rate perspective, from a power perspective, cadence, whatever it is you want to measure of those three, there is no difference. Physiologically, 300 watts on the trainer indoors is the same as 300 watts outdoors riding your bike outside. Now, that being said, what is it that a lot of times athletes are talking about when they say this was harder indoors? I don't know what it is. Well, let me let you in on what it is. It's just that mental and kind of emotional extra bit of stress and drain maybe that the indoor training does for you. For a lot of us, we do the majority of our riding outdoors, so we've gotten comfortable with that. We know how that feels. A lot of times, maybe if it's nice weather outside or we're getting together with some friends, we look forward to those kinds of moments. And indoors just doesn't have that. The indoor platforms are trying to create some kind of a social atmosphere, but it's not the same as human interaction. We're not going anywhere. And so oftentimes we just come into maybe these rides with not as good of an attitude, not looking forward to maybe getting on the trainer as much as we would getting outdoors. And therefore, what happens is when you're being given an interval session, a session that's already going to be difficult, even if done outdoors, and then you add that extra stress of being indoors, it begins to create this extra stress. And a lot of athletes come back and say, that just felt harder. That just felt more difficult than it normally would. And so there's that to consider. Now, that being stated, we can, with practice, and all you got to do to practice is ride indoors. With the more that you ride indoors, the more familiar you're going to get with what it feels like to ride indoors, with your setup, with setting things up, with taking them down, with riding on the platform that you're riding on, whatever it happens to be. You'll become more comfortable with that, and you will begin to be able to do that work, and that work will begin to, quote unquote, feel easier. It's still going to be the same workout, but it'll feel similar to how it does on the road. So point number one, physiologically, indoors and outdoors are the same. It is a myth that they are different in some way, but there's that mental emotional piece which makes indoor training seem a lot more difficult for folks. Now, that being said, I also want to address, kind of tied to that, a question of, well, how much more is riding indoors worth than riding outdoors? A lot of folks have been told about some kind of a formula where if you ride indoors for an hour, it's equivalent to maybe an hour and 15 minutes outdoors, an hour 20 outdoors. And again, I just kind of want to stop and say that it's not accurate. At least it's not something that we should begin measuring and giving you credit for, giving ourselves credit for on Training Peaks or wherever it happens to be. If you've got a 3-hour ride and you're inside, then you're thinking to yourself, oh, I've only got to ride for 2 hours and 15 minutes, and that's my 3-hour ride, because that's not true. However, what I will say, and one of the beauties, by the way, of indoor training is you don't stop pedaling. And there is something to be said for that. It's actually really good for you and really beneficial. I don't want you to bank on, okay, I've got to do less time. Do the same duration ride or workout that you had planned outdoors, but kind of filed away in the back of your mind is the fact that like these muscles are going to consistently be firing, constantly be firing, because you don't take pedal strokes off when you're indoors. You don't have the stop sign you have to coast into. You don't have the stoplight that you got to stop at. You don't have the traffic maybe that you had to wait up for and all those kinds of things. So you're consistently and constantly pedaling. Over time, I do believe that that makes a difference. I do believe that that does add up to maybe some bonus riding time. But we really don't need to go there. We really don't need to think about that. The other thing that I wanted to discuss is when you're riding indoors, make sure you have a setup that is conducive to what you're about to do. And what I mean by that is a lot of times when I see people's indoor setups, I notice that they're not adequately prepared to actually be on the trainer and do the work that's necessary because they don't have a proper setup. A lot of times I'm thinking about this in terms of fans. I'm thinking about this in terms of having some kind of wind blowing on you to cool yourself off. You see, outdoors, we get that. Even if it's not windy outside, you just going down the road at a particular speed is going to create some wind that's going to come across your skin. It's going to hopefully allow sweat that you're sweating to evaporate and cool you off, but you don't get that indoors. And so it's important that you have a fan of some sort. A big fan would be great. A really big fan would be great to be able to cool you off. But as I state that and tell you guys that, here's something that I want you to keep in mind, however. There is going to come a point where no matter what size fan you have, you are going to begin to experience cardiac drift if you are on that trainer long enough. Very similar to those of you that are watching this that live in Texas or another hot, warm place. Very similar to as you start off on a ride and you're out there longer and maybe the temperature goes up, you begin to experience your heart rate going higher for that same effort level. This is also going to happen indoors. I don't know that a lot of people think about this, but it is a thing. So if your reason why, to explain it quickly, is you begin to sweat, and at first your fan does a great job of getting that sweat and allowing it to evaporate, but eventually that fan is just not going to be able to keep up with your sweat rate. And in addition to that, as you begin to sweat and you begin to create that heat, and that heat is not being dissipated effectively by that wind, you essentially kind of create this little barrier of kind of humidity like on the top of your skin. So now you're not even really feeling the fan blowing on you anymore. And I don't know if any of you have experienced this. You can't really feel the wind actually touching your skin. It just feels like it's just kind of coming right off of you. And so that's another thing to keep in mind. Could be a good thing if you're on the trainer enough to get some heat acclimation during these months, because it could work and it is effective. But I just wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of that, because the way that that would play itself out when you're riding on the trainer and you're doing some kind of a training session on the trainer is you have to understand that you can't ride at that intensity forever as if you were in some climate controlled place and the conditions were going to be favorable for you the entire time. There is going to come a point with that indoor setup where even it is not going to be suffice to keep your core temperature down, and therefore your performance is going to suffer somewhat. So there's some things for you when you kind of begin wrapping your head around, you've got to go indoors, you don't have an option. Probably the last thing that I'll say, and I'll end with this: embrace it. Embrace the fact that you've got something, you've got a trainer, you've got a place to train. This is possible. There's not a reason to, lose fitness. There's not a reason to not continue to make gains and do the right things. Many of us, we have the opportunity to be able to ride indoors, to be able to continue to ride and not have to take days off and not have to let volume dip and those kinds of things. So the biggest thing is bring in a mental posture of being excited for this season, being excited to have some more of these kinds of days. And just know, like I said, just know that as you consistently ride more indoors, you will feel a change. You will feel your perception of that effort begin to match up more with outdoors. And to be honest with you, there's a lot of folks that struggle with this. And if you start getting over this hump, and if you start becoming more comfortable with that, then you're going to have a leg up on those individuals that are absolutely not looking forward to this time of the year and absolutely are probably going to be a hard no to doing some of these sessions indoors. And then they're going to start taking some days off. And all of a sudden you're not taking days off and you're making gains where they aren't. All right, folks, that's what I've got for you. This is always an interesting topic, and I wanted to bring it to you guys before we get into the thick and thin of it. But if you have any questions over this or anything that I made you think about that would be maybe relevant to this conversation, just leave a comment and I would love to get back with you. Folks, if you are interested in ramping up for 2025 and getting ready for your season, it is not too late. As a matter of fact, this is a great time to get a hold of something, to partner with a coach, to hold you accountable. We're coming up on Thanksgiving here soon. We're going to be at Christmas and we're going to have New Year's. And this is a time where many individuals, even though they have the best intentions, they get off the bike a little bit here and there and everywhere. And then by the time they realize it, it's January 5th and we're past the new year and we've got racing coming up soon. And all of a sudden, we maybe didn't do the things we were supposed to, and we're kind of on the back foot in terms of getting ready for the season. So don't let that be you. If you're looking for a coach, I would love to partner with you. Hit me up. Let's get something together. Thank you guys so much for your time. I appreciate it. And I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day.